In an era marked by rising geopolitical tensions, resurgent authoritarianism, and a rapidly evolving battlefield shaped by cyber threats, drones, and hypersonic weapons, the question of national defense has returned to the fore. For Great Britain, a country with a storied military past, a seat at the top tables of global diplomacy, and a reputation as a global player, the question, how ready is Great Britain for war, is both urgent and complex. The answer lies in understanding not just the physical readiness of the British Armed Forces, but also the strategic, industrial, economic, and political dimensions that shape national defence in the 21st century. To evaluate Britain's readiness for war, we must begin with the fundamentals: the structure, size, and capability of the British Armed Forces. The United Kingdom's military is composed of three primary branches: the British Army, the Royal Navy, and the Royal Air Force. Together, they form a professional force that is smaller than in previous generations, but designed to be agile, well-equipped, and technologically advanced. Yet the reality of Britain's military posture is far more nuanced. As of 2025, the British Army has a target strength of just over 73,000 full-time regular soldiers, a figure that falls short of earlier commitments and has been criticised as insufficient by defence analysts. In fact, the British Army is at its smallest size since the Napoleonic Wars, reflecting a long-term trend of downsizing that has accelerated since the end of the Cold War. This reduction has been justified in part by a pivot toward a more mobile, expeditionary force structure, supported by advanced technology and rapid deployment capabilities. However, critics argue that numbers still matter. In the face of potential large-scale conflict, particularly in the European theatre, where tensions with Russia have escalated following the invasion of Ukraine, the ability to field and sustain significant ground forces remains essential. The British Army's armoured capabilities, once the backbone of NATO's northern flank, have been significantly diminished. The number of operational Challenger 2 main battle tanks has been reduced, with only 148 being upgraded to the Challenger 3 standard. Meanwhile, delays and funding issues continue to plague the Army's modernization programs, such as the troubled Ajax reconnaissance vehicle project, which has suffered from performance issues and delays that have set back its deployment by years. In addition, the restructuring of the Army into a more networked force under the Future Soldier program has come with growing pains. Units have been merged, disbanded, or retasked in ways that have created uncertainty among troops and disrupted institutional continuity. The ambition is clear: to create a leaner, more lethal force that leverages data and long-range fires. But whether these reforms will deliver a battlefield advantage against a peer adversary remains an open question. The Royal Navy, traditionally a cornerstone of British power, has undergone significant transformation in recent years. The commissioning of two Queen Elizabeth-class aircraft carriers, HMS Queen Elizabeth and HMS Prince of Wales, marks a bold statement of maritime ambition. These carriers symbolise a return to carrier strike capability and are designed to project power globally, in partnership with the F-35B stealth fighter jets. However, their presence also underscores certain vulnerabilities. Carriers require significant escort and logistical support to operate safely in contested environments. Yet the Royal Navy has struggled to maintain a sufficient number of surface escort ships. The number of operational Type 23 frigates and Type 45 destroyers is limited, and ongoing maintenance challenges have occasionally left gaps in fleet availability. Efforts are underway to address this with the future Type 26 and Type 31 frigates. But these vessels are still under construction, and it will take years before they fully replace the aging fleet. Submarine capability remains a key strength of the Royal Navy, particularly with its Vanguard-class ballistic missile submarines forming the UK's continuous at-sea nuclear deterrent. The Astute-class attack submarines are also among the most capable in the world, though their numbers remain limited. In sum, while the Royal Navy retains high-end capabilities, it is constrained by budgetary pressures and personnel shortages, and its ability to sustain prolonged operations or respond to multiple global crises simultaneously is limited. The Royal Air Force too has undergone substantial transformation. The introduction of the F-35B Lightning II, alongside the Eurofighter Typhoon, provides the RAF with a potent air superiority and strike capability. The RAF has also invested in unmanned aerial vehicles, surveillance assets, and aerial refueling platforms. However, it faces challenges of its own. The total number of combat aircraft is relatively small compared to peer adversaries, and the service has had to retire several older platforms without immediate replacements. The RAF has also contended with recruitment and retention issues, as well as strain on its logistical and support infrastructure. One of the key elements of modern warfare is the integration of cyber, space, and electronic warfare domains. The UK has taken notable steps in this direction. The creation of the UK Space Command and the National Cyber Force reflects an awareness of the changing nature of conflict. These units are designed to counter hybrid threats, cyber attacks, and adversary operations in space. Yet these capabilities remain in development and are still maturing. The cyber domain, in particular, presents a constant race between offence and defence. And while the UK has established itself as a capable actor, it is vulnerable to sophisticated attacks on its critical infrastructure, financial systems, and military networks. The UK's nuclear deterrent remains a pillar of its defence strategy. Britain is one of the few countries that maintains a continuous at-sea deterrent, relying on the Vanguard-class submarines armed with Trident II D5 missiles. This strategic deterrent is undergoing modernisation through the Dreadnought program, which will eventually replace the ageing Vanguard class. While some argue that nuclear weapons ensure Britain's ultimate security, others contend that they are irrelevant in deterring or responding to the types of conflicts most likely to be fought in the 21st century: regional, asymmetric, and hybrid wars that play out below the threshold of open, state-on-state conflict. Beyond the armed forces themselves, industrial capacity is a critical dimension of war readiness. In a prolonged or high-intensity conflict, the ability to manufacture and replenish munitions, vehicles, and equipment is essential. Yet, like many Western nations, Britain has allowed much of its defence industrial base to shrink since the Cold War. Stockpiles of key munitions, including artillery shells and precision-guided weapons, have been drawn down to peacetime levels. The war in Ukraine has highlighted the need for sustained industrial output to support modern warfare. The UK's ability to ramp up production quickly remains questionable, particularly in the absence of robust national stockpiles and strategic reserves. A similar concern applies to logistics and sustainment. Britain's military has global reach, but this comes with substantial logistical demands. The Royal Fleet Auxiliary, responsible for supporting Royal Navy operations, has faced cuts and aging platforms. Airlift and sealift capabilities are critical for deploying and sustaining forces abroad, yet they are limited in number. The future multi-role support ships, MRSS, are still on the drawing board, and without a significant lift capacity, Britain's ability to respond rapidly and at scale to overseas crises is constrained. Personnel is another core aspect of readiness. Across the services, recruitment and retention have become increasingly difficult. The armed forces compete with the civilian sector for skilled individuals in areas like cyber, engineering, and technology. A shrinking pool of young people eligible and willing to serve, combined with broader societal shifts, has made maintaining full manning levels a perennial challenge. Morale and quality of life issues, delays in pay systems, housing shortages, and overuse of deployments all contribute to retention difficulties. Beyond the military sphere, Britain's readiness for war must also be evaluated in terms of civil resilience. In the event of major conflict, especially one involving attacks on the homeland, civilian infrastructure, transportation, energy, food supply, and health systems become targets or stress points. During the Cold War, Britain maintained comprehensive civil defence plans, but many of these were dismantled in the post-Cold War peace dividend. Efforts to rebuild resilience have been slow. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed vulnerabilities in supply chains, emergency preparedness, and public coordination. In a wartime scenario, these issues would be exponentially more serious. National mobilisation, civilian support for the military effort, and protection of critical infrastructure are all areas requiring renewed focus. Another factor that shapes war readiness is energy security. Modern militaries are heavily reliant on fuel, and nations that cannot secure energy supplies during conflict may find themselves paralysed. Britain's domestic energy production has declined in recent decades, and while efforts are being made to diversify through renewables and nuclear energy, the transition is incomplete. Energy infrastructure remains a potential target in any conflict, and resilience in this sector is integral to sustaining both civilian life and military operations. Diplomatically and strategically, Britain remains a key member of NATO and maintains strong defence ties with allies such as the United States, Australia, Canada, and European partners. The UK's integrated review of security, defence, development and foreign policy, most recently updated in 2023, emphasised the Indo-Pacific tilt, cyber resilience and deterrence. The AUKUS pact with the US and Australia reflects Britain's ambition to remain a serious defence actor on the global stage. However, some critics argue that Britain's strategic focus is stretched too thin, trying to maintain influence in both Europe and the Indo-Pacific without sufficient resources to sustain either fully. The war in Ukraine has spurred renewed investment and urgency in defence matters. The UK was among the first to send military aid to Ukraine, including anti-tank weapons, artillery systems, and training. This has showcased Britain's capability to respond quickly and act decisively in support of allies. However, the aid effort has also revealed the thinness of British stockpiles and the slow pace at which they can be replenished. In a hypothetical conflict where Britain was a primary belligerent rather than a supporter, the pressure on supply chains and logistics would be far greater. Budgetary considerations underpin all of these factors. The UK currently spends just over 2% of GDP on defence, meeting NATO's guideline. However, calls are growing to increase this to 2.5% or even 3% in light of the changing security environment. Defence inflation, the high cost of modern equipment, and the need to invest in new domains such as space and cyber all strain the budget. Choices must be made between readiness, modernisation, personnel, and strategic ambition. Without a clear national consensus and long-term political commitment, defence policy risks becoming reactive rather than proactive. Public support and political will are also key. War readiness is not just about tanks and planes, it's about the national mindset. Does the public understand the risks? Is there political alignment across parties on defence priorities? The UK has seen growing awareness of global threats, but defence is still a relatively low priority issue in domestic politics. That could change rapidly in the event of crisis, but history shows that waiting until crisis hits is often too late. So how ready is Great Britain for war? The answer is that Britain retains formidable capabilities in key areas: elite special forces, strategic intelligence, a global navy, advanced air power, and nuclear deterrence. It is a core member of NATO and an influential actor in global security. But the broader picture reveals significant challenges: understrength ground forces, thin stockpiles, overstretched logistics, industrial constraints, fragile civil resilience, and a political culture still adjusting to the prospect of high-end warfare. The country is well positioned to contribute to coalition operations, conduct limited interventions, or respond to crises in specific theatres. But in a major, protracted, high-intensity conflict involving a peer adversary, its ability to fight and win would be heavily dependent on allies, rapid industrial mobilisation, and national will. Readiness is not static. It must be continually reassessed, resourced, and reinforced. The strategic environment is changing fast, and if Britain wishes to remain secure and influential, it must invest not only in its military, but in the full spectrum of national resilience. In the end, war readiness is not a destination, it is a discipline. For Great Britain, the challenge lies in reconciling ambition with capability, tradition with innovation, and deterrence with preparedness.